Our last talk is from Raman Ganguly, and he will say something about the importance of open source for repositories. I think that's a very interesting topic for us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Susanne. So we talked today a lot of open source, and for a lot of people who are involved with data management and who are here, that's very common that you are working with, that you use open source software. But the question is why? Why do you do this? Maybe because there's no other opportunity, but I like to also point this out that it's really important that you use open source for data management and for that what we are doing. So why is this? The basic is what we want to do or what we want to achieve is to preserve data, to have a long-term preservation for data and a various bunch of different kind of data. So this can be documents, this can be audio files, this can be unstructured data. So it's very, very different kind of data. And when we are going to the people and say, preserve the data, and we say them what kind of data we want to preserve, then we say for all kind of data, and this but is depending on the format. So because if we are going to a long-term perspective, then we need to have information about the format, because it's very likely that in 30 or 40 and 50 years, this format we are using today are not anymore readable. And for this we need strategies to make them, the data, what we preserve today, make them readable, reusable again. And this is only possible if you have information about the data itself and the format itself. So in this case, open format is very important. And this leads us also to the FAIR principles. So the FAIR principles is the guidance of now what we have in Europe is the European Open Science Cloud to make the data available for upcoming research, because we are now producing data which maybe will be in interest in future times. And we want to prepare also the science or the research for today, that you are able to use these kind of data, what you produce today, in the future. Why? Because this is the normal way of doing science. You produce also papers, and in former times, all the data, what is used, they could be presented in the books they have written. And this is, with a data-driven science, not possible anymore. And that's why it's important also to look closer to the data and also to preserve the data. And this data should following the FAIR principles, so that you can find it, that you can read it, that you can access it, that you can reuse it, and it's interoperable. And also for these, the open formats is the important driver, because you can reuse it only when you know what kind of format you're using, because otherwise you need to use exactly the software that are produced with these, that data are produced with. So also in this way, when we are talking about data, when we are talking about this way, we always promote open format, open standards, and to follow this. So these are the guidance for a long-term preservation. And in the long-term preservation, we not only look at the data itself, we also have to look at the software, because the format or the data can only be interpreted by the software itself. So we have these view on a different kind of so the view is very long term, and in the long term they have changed a lot of things. So also when we go into the software, then the question is this software what you're using now to access, to interpret the data, is this available in 20 or 40 years? And if the software is available, we have the machines that we can run this software? So there's a whole lot of chain that's important, what we have to look, that we can access the data. It's not that easy like with books. You can pull it out of the shelf, and if you can read the language, then it's possible to reuse the things what we have. So we have considered a lot of more things, and really to think very long term. And there's the question, these kind of computers what we're showing here, that's from the time span of working with data, because you can say data, we work for a long time with data since really science involved, they always worked with data, but this is not long ago, but the data they produced with these machines it's very hard to access today. And these are the questions what we should think about when we are going to data management and when we are thinking about the data and preserving the data. The principles is what we can do with the data is in a way to migrate it, because we cannot see, or we don't know which kind of tools we will use in 30 or 40 years to access the data. So nobody was thinking 20 years ago that you are now walking with a small computer in your pocket and access data on a daily basis. So nobody didn't expect this. And we cannot foresee what will happen in 20 years or 30 years or 40 years. So the way how we access data in future will be completely in the other way than we do it today. And the only thing is how we deal with this situation is to think about to migrate the data. So there will be for sure some kind of data that's not possible to migrate, but the most or the great amount of data will be in some kind migrate on a long term. So it's a ever migrating for the eternity, that we can ensure that we can access the data also in the future. So also for these, the information and the knowledge about the format is very important, because otherwise the migration wouldn't be possible. So you need the insight. So also for these, open formats, open standards is very important. These are the benefits what we have. And the benefits is also that when we are using the open standards, we can see that if every other pieces in our environment are also using open standards, then these open standards are also designed in a way that you can use it and you can combine it and you can build something new together. And when we think about data, as we see, we have to think about the whole ecosystem where the data is living. And for the whole ecosystem, it's very important that we follow the same structure as we are following with the formats, with the data itself. So for the whole ecosystem, using open standards, this is the main benefit, because we don't know what's happening in the future. And what's about now the infrastructure? As I told you before, that's important to look at the infrastructure itself, because the data are living in this infrastructure, and the infrastructure is needed to access the data. And now we are building infrastructure for preserving the data. And what we need to also look at these, what we are doing, look at the infrastructure, what we have built, where we are put our data, which we want to preserve, they must follow the same rules. Otherwise, we will run into troubles. Because if we have infrastructure, and then they'll leave the data in this infrastructure, and then the infrastructure breaks, or we have to renew the infrastructure, and we don't know how this infrastructure is work inside, so we cannot bring the data out, or we cannot then implement new data or to migrate this infrastructure, we run in the same problems as we would have with the data itself. And I'm pretty sure that we are talking today about PHAIDRA, and I'm pretty sure that in the future, so in 30 years, maybe PHAIDRA is not a topic anymore, but some other tools will be the topic and some other tools for preserving data, because I don't think that preserving data is just a hype which we have for the next 10 years and then it disappears. I think preserving the data will stay, and for these we have also to think what will happen after the things what we are doing, because we are thinking long term. And for this we have to follow also some principles for the infrastructure itself. And these principles is, for the first thing, it's that we can bring the data easily inside of the infrastructure. Why this is important? Because if it's very complicated or a lot of work, nobody will do it. And if nobody brings data inside of the preserving infrastructure, then the data will be lost. So that's why easy import is important. And also easy export is important. Why? We want to reuse it. So we will not reuse it into preserving infrastructure. We want to reuse it somewhere else. But also, when we go into the long-term perspective, is also we need to migrate our infrastructure. And for these, our infrastructure must be able to bring easily data in and bring easily data out. This is one of the principles for infrastructure, what we need for data preservation. Secure data. So we are talking about a lot of trust. This infrastructure, what we are doing is must be very trustful. We implement certifications that these are very trustful. But in the main, what's behind is that the people who gives us the data, who wants to preserve the data and hand it over to us, they want that this data be secured, that the data won't be changed and the data won't get lost. And this is the main reason. So we need secure infrastructure. And as we all know who are working in IT or be part of the IT movement, or what we are doing now with IT, is that security is not something what you do now and then it's secure forever. You have to continually work on security as well, because the situation and the things can change to break into systems. And so we need to know how our infrastructure are secured, what are the vulnerabilities, what are the strengths, and we need also to have more insights about our infrastructure, that we can do this, secure the data what we get. Flexibility. So our infrastructure must be very flexible. Securing data and being very flexible is a big challenge. But why need we this flexibility also? This flexibility we need because so much new data are coming. and we don't know how to work with new kinds of data, which there are now coming. But we should also have some ideas for solution to secure also the data, which we have no fixed standard now, or now we don't know exactly how to deal with this. But also maybe in the future we need a closer look. So we need this flexibility, and also when we are going deeper the road of the data preservation, then we see, okay, we started with a file, and then there come the databases, and then there come the applications, and new things are coming. So we need also the flexibility inside of the infrastructure to build new systems, to have a solid ecosystem where all this data can live and where all this different kind of data can live. And with all the paradigm for that, it's easily input, easy output, and secure data, and so on. Sustainability. I think when we are talking about long-term preservation, sustainability must be a must. So otherwise it wouldn't work. So the data what we have must be sustained, and the infrastructure itself. Because when you have an infrastructure where now you preserve the data and this infrastructure is not sustained, this infrastructure breaks. So all the data will get lost as well. So the sustainability of this infrastructure is very important. And this is also a main driver. So we also need the people who are running this infrastructure. Otherwise we cannot do data preservation. Because you see it on a road. A road is a solid infrastructure. You drive every day on this. But if you don't maintain it, there's no sustainability at all. So also this we have to consider when we're talking about infrastructure for data preservation. And of course, easy to migrate. And here I don't talk about the data. We talked about the data before. We are talking about the infrastructure, because also the infrastructure will change. And if you have a bunch of data inside of the infrastructure, what you preserve, and then the infrastructure cannot be migrated to a new version or to a new system or whatever, then this infrastructure will be looked away because it's a lot of work, and then you have no sustainability in this side of infrastructure. You have no sustainability at all at the data, and you don't do the data management right in this way. So, and all these things, what I talked before, in all the things is open source what can really help us. Because open source is community driven. That's our we. We are here in this room. We know exactly what we need. And this is nothing what we can buy in a shop or buy in some software companies, because there are new kind of ways how we look to the data. And these are new ways of challenges what we are facing. And for these we know what we need, we know our challenge, and so we need to work together. And the best way is to work together is in a way to work openly, and open is very important as well, as we have seen. We work in a community, and also that we know what we are doing, that we know the source code, that we know what the features are, what the strengths are, what the things is, what we are doing. So, and these can help us when we go into the open source projects. So this is not what we're not only about we want to develop because it's so much fun to develop everything by ourselves, and we want to have everything under control. That's also about doing our job right. Because we have to know what we are doing, we have to know, get big insights, and we cannot rely that the infrastructure which is built from a company, this company maybe doesn't exist in 30, 40 years again. But we rely on these, what they are doing. So it's also important that we work in the open source, because even if we and our project doesn't exist, the documentation is still available. And the documentation must be available for the people that come after us and work with the data and work with the things what we are doing now. And that's why I believe that open source is one of the big benefit what we can do in data preservation and also in building infrastructure with data preservation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ramon, for this great presentation about openness, about open source, and about our next steps in the next 40 years. So, do you have questions or suggestions? Yes.
Hi, Ramon. How can I blame you in 50 years if something will not work? No, I mean, are there currently experience or on long-term preservation that we can learn something? I mean, someone that is really maintaining a system in 30s. I think that the early 90s we already have systems, so 30 years are passed. Maybe there are some example we can see to learn.
I think we had already learned a lot from the 90s, and I see also the big problem of the file formats. So in the 90s, nobody didn't care about if the software will be open, this because everybody would think, okay, new software will always deal with the old format. And then came the 2000 and the past 2000, and then suddenly some file formats couldn't be opened anymore. So this was the first main trigger that we see, okay, we will have a problem with this. And also, on the other hand, is we can also go a little bit further down in the 50s. So we are now having some research also from the old machines, the beginning of the computer age. And we have these big hard drives. So this, I think, some megabytes in storage was like a room or something like this. You can see the zeros and the one, but you have no idea what's behind. So, and these are these questions we already have experienced this, and I think we are learning from this, and also that we can learn also a lot from the open source community. And we're talking about open science, we're talking about open data, we're talking about openness. And I think we should also be in this path, what we are telling our clients that they should do, telling the researchers they should do.
My question will run down to the request to share whatever papers, literature you have on how to assess open source software. Here's the reason. One of the things that I particularly like about our dialogue is that you, from the central services, have an overview of the entirety of the university, which we as humanities people don't have. We started this year a ministry follow-up infrastructure project, DH Infra. We joined later. It's run by the University of Graz, and one of the work packages is about open source software. Nobody's yet taken possession of it, so we're not even having an agenda, but what the agenda will be is to have us humanists put together on the table what software, open software solutions we use, and then the question starts. Okay, we know what we use, but what then should we do about it? And so my question is, with regard to the infrastructural systems and solutions, and with regards to other disciplines, so from astronomy to molecular biology, what is your experience? How is a decision well made to say, okay, we keep 5 and we discard other 5? Because this is what's going to come up. So potentially I'm asking for a catalog of criteria. Perhaps you have one.
I think what's the big strength of open source is also a big weakness. That's the community. What I mean with this, because we need to balance different interests. And this is a process. This is nothing what we can decide by now and then say fix it. So that's what a company can do. They say this is the path you have to go. It's the community, it's we are discussing this, and then it's also the problem of scale, because we have now a community of people who are running infrastructure for data management. Then you have the community of digital humanities, or the humanities community, with a lot of infrastructure. And these are the problems, and these are the things we should work on, really, to bring these together and to see how we balance different interests. And especially when we come to different communities, to have a solid thing that's these are the 5 software systems what we are need to go is hard to do, but yes, we need to make also decisions, because it's not possible to run thousands of different software systems. So it's about the sustainability. It's not sustain that we have 200 different software systems what we are running and we have to maintain and so on and so on. So we have to make also the decision, and we have to learn how to make the decisions over communities and to bring these together. And I think these will the things what we need to learn as well.
Talking about communities, coming from like a musical background, communities in terms of like say choir movement, very important, because you're doing some music together, and then afterwards you're joining and enjoying time together and discussing stuff that was happening before. So the PHAIDRAcon is, you mentioned before, once a year. So there's like a time gap of about 1 year that you know what's happening, what did happen last year, so what are we going to do next? You're asking for a catalog of open source software. There is some kind of catalog for digital humanities in the USA. They have quite a lot of software there. So, but it's what they need and what they do think. USA and Canada, there's like they have like great resources on the internet. I can share afterwards if you like. I did a little research recently about that. But what we need here, we're talking about PHAIDRA. There's like the GAMS project for long-term preservation in Graz, or had been actually, because it's like an old project. Is there a follow-up? Does it eventually try to catch up with what's going on here? Is the PHAIDRA project the bigger one? Is there other projects? So I think the most important thing in terms of long term is that we have the overview, like you did mention before, and we see what is like some kind of technology project infrastructure, like I did say, that's long term sustainable. So that has like much more of a future than the other ones. So you can tell this is something that uses software components that don't work like within the next 10 years, but here this has like a much better perspective of sustainability. Just a tiny little example. space shuttles, the old ones, they were using really old hardware, because in space there's much more danger to modern computers than to old computers. So they were in the position that they had to try to go like to black market somehow, second-hand flea market, stuff like that, to get old machines, because this is the components they need in or did need in the space shuttles to go to space. Modern computers wouldn't have worked because they would have been destroyed by space radiation.
Yeah. You raise several aspects. And it's hard for me to answer because I'm wearing two hats. So one of the hats is running the project PHAIDRA, develop PHAIDRA as an infrastructure and want to promote PHAIDRA. So that's we're here as the PHAIDRAcon. Yes, this is one hat, but the second hat is I'm also responsible for data preservation at the university. And for this I ask myself the same questions. And one of the solutions what is coming up is to grow the community of PHAIDRA, because we are now 15 years, and we hope we will be the next 15 years also relevant, and at least. And but the question is also how to do this. And you're right when we say, okay, just once a year to have this PHAIDRAcon, it's not enough. You're right. We have to grow the community, but it's a starting point. I see this as a starting point, as a wonderful starting point to have you all here in the room. Before 2 years ago, we had all online, and now we are meeting here in the same room. And we want to progress this, and we want to take you with on this path.
That's why we all hear this.
Where are your questions? Are there any questions? Okay. So, Raman, what would you say? What could be the next steps for us, for research data manager, and what are the next steps for researchers? What could this be?
So, I think for us, when we are talking now more from a perspective of the units that we are doing data management for an institution. So for this is really to involve, and this is also the question, what we should do, what the researchers should do, is to get closer together. And I'm very happy that we had also researchers here today and talking about what they're doing, because we have to connect. And the important thing is that we have to connect is that the infrastructure itself can only be as good as we know the requirements from the users, and our users are the researcher. So we have to connect to each other. We have to talk with the researchers, and we have to get involved with the research project. And there are two different worlds they are meeting, and that's not an easy task, but I think we can do this challenge.
Thanks. I'll just add one thing to the equation, also the students, because the students are the future researchers. And incidentally, just last week, Rasta and Mr. Gonta were as kind as to grant access or to install an account for the UNIV GitLab instance to the students of one of the classes I'm teaching. And we just wanted to show them GitLab and do that in a safe space and do that with the in-house resources. And they all went, can we also use this outside the course? And we were, yes, of course, because this is there for you. And I think this is really a message that we need to drive home by not just telling them that it exists, but assigning them to install it, basically.
Yeah. Yes, you're right. There.
You have one comment here from the University of Applied Arts. We do have a a working group built since roughly 2 years, and it's all about, imagine you are an art student and you use something for image manipulation, like a program of Adobe, which is expensive. It is expensive, and you come out of the university and then you want to establish something, and you don't have access to this kind of software. So they are like, can't do anything. So in this group we discuss some approaches how to implement open software in the courses. The case I just mentioned, one of the students took to a professor and said in the working group, so that's the case. That's how we try to approach this this open source idea out of the educational area. Yeah, I just want to mention that it's happening, and it's disseminated through like internal enhancement workshops, like Weiterbildung, and it is free for the people of the university, and they like to do this and disseminate it through this way. And we also have like gathered several softwares like GIMP, which is something similar to like Photoshop. Thank you. And so there are a couple LibreOffice for Word or whatever, and they call it we call it Free Library Open Source Software Working Group. Wanted you to know.
Thank you for this comment, and also yes, it's important also to include the students. We need to include also the next generation, because they have to deal what we are doing now in the future, and bringing these to the whole system and to the whole equation, it's important. Yes, I say to both. Yes, it's a good good comment and a good approach. We should do this.
Are there any others? Questions or suggestions? Comments?
To do this community stuff, like the tiny little, let's say, boards at the, let it be like MetaMost or whatever kind of tool that's to be used to have like a blackboard or a whiteboard or whichever way you want to say it, that there's like a tiny little community for like going over this gap of this 1 year, so that there is like, I don't know, some findings from one side, some findings from other sides, and to interconnecting and see if there's something that helps on more than just my side, but like to everyone.
Yes, we discussed it also yesterday. We had a fighter partner meeting yesterday, and also in the evening we had at the dinner we discussed already this, and also today in some discussions in the breaks we have also come up with these ideas. And yes, we will definitely do something in this direction. What exactly we have to think about? It should be easy to access. So we are also discussing about mailing lists, because most of the people are still using emails, and there's nothing to install. Beside, with MetaMost you normally have to install something, but we will think about and we will come with some solutions.
Last week we did attend the NFDI for Culture online event, actually to have to go to Germany, but like would be like the German, especially research and science community, so that like German-speaking countries could like find a way to work together, to have even a broader board and a broader view, because digital humanities is something that's going on here and somewhere else. So we did see what's happening. I'm coming from the field of musicology. So seeing what's going on in Hamburg, they are using artificial intelligence for their research because they have a professor, Rolf Bader, who is like very interested in that stuff. And he was promoting artificial intelligence, and it did build quite a lot of really interesting tools. And then you have on the other side, like the Phonogrammarchiv in Berlin. Berlin and Vienna were the most important phonogram archives at the beginning of the 20th century. And he was like just complaining about he doesn't have money, he has a building that's like breaking down, he doesn't know how to preserve his collection, so there's no way to doing research at all. So you have like one person who is doing like incredible things and the other one is just trying to keep up with not breaking down completely. So this is something that's going on in our neighboring country and could be eventually if, let's say, you learn something from them, we learn and we can give them something back, what's going on here. So eventually it helps all of us.
Yeah. So we are, and that's again the community aspect with the strengths and the weakness. We also be involved in a broader phase with international communities on data management. So all this what's happening in research with FAIR, with EARS and on the international basis. But we are missing out some other communities like you mentioned now at the moment. And the question is how to involve them, how to connect with them, and also how to bring more value to this community as well. Yeah, but thank you for mentioning this. Yeah.
May I add something? We have this WebManet, a network for repository manager now since 2016, and I think it's working very good, and it's for the whole Austria and also for German-speaking people abroad, and maybe it's also a possibility to ask some questions or to give some presentations. We have also a working group there, so maybe also this could be a possibility for one of the many possibilities to join and to keep in touch.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you.